Family gatherings can be complicated, especially when you're still treated like a child well into adulthood. This is the story of Melissa Thompson, a successful 45-year-old executive who was relegated to the kids' table at her family's Thanksgiving dinner. Instead of accepting this dismissal, she decided to take matters into her own hands, hosting an elegant dinner party that would change her family dynamic forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. For as long as I can remember, my place in the family hierarchy had been rigidly defined. Despite my accomplishments, my executive position at one of Seattle's top marketing firms, my mortgage-free condo overlooking Elliott Bay, and my master's degree from Stanford, I was perpetually Little Missy to my older siblings and their spouses. It was November 2024, and another Thanksgiving was approaching. Every year, my older brother Ryan hosted the festivities at his sprawling colonial in Maple Valley. His wife Courtney, a former interior designer with a flair for the dramatic, transformed their dining room into something out of a Williams-Sonoma catalog. My sister Amber and her husband Greg would fly in from Chicago with their 3 teenagers. Our youngest brother Jason and his wife Tiffany brought their twin 5-year-olds. And then there was me. Divorced for 8 years, childless by choice, and according to family lore, still finding myself. The Thompson family dynamic had calcified decades ago. Ryan, the eldest, was the responsible one who followed in our father's footsteps as a corporate attorney. Amber was the nurturing middle child who became an elementary school principal. Jason, despite being younger than me, had settled down properly with a nice suburban home and photogenic children. I had broken the mold. After my divorce from Daniel, I'd thrown myself into my career, traveled extensively, and dabble in everything. From competitive rock climbing to gourmet cooking classes. To them, this wasn't living authentically. It was running away from adult responsibilities. "Melissa, I'm so glad you could make it this year," Courtney said as she air-kissed my cheeks at the door. She was wearing an apron that said, "Blessed" and "Thankful," while somehow looking like she'd stepped out of a J. Crew catalog. "We weren't sure if you'd be in town or off on another one of your adventures." I smiled tightly. Wouldn't miss it. I handed her the bottle of Cabernet I'd splurged on, a 2015 Quilceda Creek that had cost me nearly $200. "For dinner." "Oh, how thoughtful," she said, barely glancing at the label before setting it aside. "I've already decanted the wine Ryan selected, but we can save this for another time." The house smelled amazing: sage and roasted turkey, cinnamon and pumpkin. Family photos lined the hallway, showcasing the growing brood of nieces and nephews. My appearances were limited to group shots at weddings and holidays, with the occasional solo picture from decades past. Amber swooped in for a hug. "Little sister, we've missed you. The kids were just asking about their cool Aunt Melissa and all her wild stories." Before I could respond, my 7-year-old niece Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Aunt Melissa, did you really swim with sharks?" I smiled, kneeling down. "I did, in the Galapagos. They were gentle whale sharks, bigger than a school bus, but completely harmless." "So cool." Emma's eyes widened. "Mom says I'm not allowed to travel alone until I'm at least 30. Amber laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Well, we can't all be free spirits like your Aunt Melissa." The pre-dinner mingling followed, its usual pattern. My brothers discussed property values and retirement portfolios while their wives exchanged school district horror stories and recipe modifications. I drifted between conversations, never quite fitting into any of them. So, Ryan cornered me by the appetizer spread. "Still with that marketing firm?" "What is it, 5 years now?" 8, I corrected. "I made a partner last spring." "Partner?" "Well, that's committed." He seemed genuinely surprised. "I always figured you'd hop to something else eventually. You know, like that pottery phase you went through." "That was a weekend workshop, Ryan, when I was 17. He chuckled, patting my shoulder. Always trying new things. That's our Missy. Dinner was announced with the ringing of a small silver bell, Courtney's tradition. We moved toward the dining room, where the table was a masterpiece of autumn decor. A hand-calligraphed place card waited at each setting. Mine was nowhere to be seen. "Courtney," I asked, trying to keep my voice light, "where am I sitting?" She didn't look up from arranging the gravy boat. "Oh, we're tight on space at the main table with all the kids getting bigger. I've set up the breakfast nook for you and the younger ones. I thought you wouldn't mind. You're so good with children." The breakfast nook, the kids' table. I stood frozen as the implications washed over me. My siblings and their spouses filed into their assigned seats at the mahogany dining table my parents had passed down. 8 adults, not including me. The table could seat 10 comfortably. "Is there a problem?" Courtney finally looked up, her expression a mixture of concern and impatience. Every response that came to mind seemed either pathetically meek or unnecessarily confrontational. So I just smiled. No problem at all. The breakfast nook had been decorated as an afterthought. Paper napkins instead of linen, regular glasses instead of crystal, and none of the elaborate centerpieces that adorned the main table. My companions were Emma, her 9-year-old brother Cooper, and Jason's 5-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas. "Aunt Melissa's at our table," Lucas announced, bouncing in his booster seat. "That's right, buddy." I helped him spread his napkin on his lap, ignoring the conversation flowing from the dining room just 15 feet away. "Mom says you don't have kids because you're selfish," Cooper informed me matter-of-factly, reaching for a roll. "Is that true?" The adult conversation in the other room faltered momentarily, then resumed with deliberate loudness. "No, Cooper. That's not true," I said quietly. "Sometimes adults make different choices for their lives, and that's okay." "I think you'd be a good mom," Emma declared, carefully cutting her turkey into precise squares. "You don't talk to us like we're babies." "Thank you, sweetie." The meal proceeded with me cutting meat for the twins, refilling juice glasses, and mediating disputes over who got the drumstick. From the main table came bursts of laughter, clinks of wine glasses, and conversations about school fundraisers and promotion prospects. Adult talk deemed unsuitable or uninteresting for the kids' table occupant. When Courtney brought the pumpkin pie to the main table with a flourish, I watched Ryan pour small glasses of dessert wine for everyone. Everyone except me, forgotten in kid territory. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. In the hallway powder room, I stared at my reflection. I didn't look like someone who should be relegated to the kids' table. My hair was expensively highlighted, my outfit carefully chosen. Laugh lines had started to appear around my eyes, evidence of a life well lived. This wasn't about the seating arrangement. It was about respect, about recognition that my life choices, while different, were valid. That at 45, I deserved a place at the adult table regardless of my marital status or reproductive choices. As I returned to the breakfast nook, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend Veronica. "How's the family interrogation going? Need a rescue?" Veronica had been my rock since college. Unlike me, she'd embraced the traditional path, husband, 3 kids, suburban home, but she'd never judged my different choices. In fact, she defended them fiercely. Suddenly, an idea took shape, a way to reclaim my dignity without creating a scene that would cement my reputation as the dramatic sister. I texted back, "I'm fine, but I need a favor, big one. Are you free next Saturday?" The kids were debating whether Santa was real when I returned. I joined their conversation with renewed energy, genuinely interested in their thoughts on the subject. Cooper had developed a complex theory involving parents as Santa's regional representatives, while Emma maintained a diplomatic agnosticism on the issue. These kids were smart, observant, and treated me with more genuine interest than the adults at the other table. Maybe the kids' table was the better place to be tonight, but that didn't mean I would accept being put there by default for every family gathering to come. After dessert, as everyone migrated to the living room for the traditional post-meal coma and football watching, I pulled Courtney aside. "Thanks for hosting, as always. Everything was delicious." "Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. The kids just love having you at their table. You're so patient with them." Her smile was genuine but condescending. "About that," I continued smoothly, "I wanted to let everyone know I'll be hosting a dinner party next Saturday. I've rented a private room at Canlis." I named Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, where reservations were typically booked months in advance. Courtney's eyebrows shot up. "At Canlis? How did you manage that?" "A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." "One of my clients is the owner's cousin," I said, which was true. "Enough. I'd love for everyone to come. Adults only, though. I've already arranged for a childcare service to watch the kids in an adjoining room with movies and games." "That's unexpected." Courtney seemed genuinely flustered. "What's the occasion? Do I need one?" "I thought it would be nice to treat everyone to a special evening." I smiled. "I'll text everyone the details tomorrow. Black tie optional." As I drove home that night, windows down despite the November chill, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years of family gatherings. Anticipation. Not dread, not resignation, but genuine excitement. In the week that followed, I threw myself into preparations with the same intensity I brought to major client pitches. Veronica helped me secure not just any room at Canlis, but their legendary lakeside private dining space, with panoramic views of Lake Union and the Seattle skyline. I spent hours with the chef, customizing a menu that would showcase seasonal Northwest ingredients with sophisticated global influences. My family's responses rolled in gradually. Ryan and Courtney accepted immediately, impressed by the venue. Amber and Greg were more hesitant. They'd need to find a sitter for their kids back in Chicago, but ultimately decided they could make it work for one night. Jason and Tiffany initially declined, citing childcare concerns, until I clarified that professional childcare would be provided on-site. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I felt a shift in our family dynamic. I wasn't asking for permission or acceptance. I was extending an invitation. The power balance had subtly changed. The day before the dinner, I met with the childcare service, 3 experienced nannies who regularly worked high-end events, and walked them through the adjacent room where the kids would be entertained. I'd arranged for age-appropriate movies, games, and even a mini dessert bar to make the evening special for them too. "The children will be well taken care of," assured the lead nanny, Denise. "The parents can check on them any time, but we're professionals. They won't have to worry." "Perfect," I replied. "And they'll have their own dinner served here?" "Yes, a special kids menu from the Canlis kitchen. Quite the treat." Everything was falling into place. That evening, I picked up my outfit, a midnight blue evening gown that had required emergency tailoring to fit perfectly. As I stood in my condo, looking out at the lights reflecting on Elliott Bay, I reminded myself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about redefining my place in the family. Still, as I rehearsed my welcome speech one last time, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of what was to come. Saturday arrived with Seattle's typical November weather, a soft, misty rain that made the city lights blur and dance. I arrived at Canlis 2 hours early to oversee the final preparations. The private dining room was transformed exactly as I'd envisioned, elegant but not stuffy, with low arrangements of winter blooms and berries allowing for easy conversation across the table. The wall of windows showcased the rain-slicked city. Below, ferries crossing the dark water with their lights aglow. The maitre d' approached as I adjusted one of the place settings. "Ms. Thompson, everything is prepared according to your specifications. Would you like to review the wine pairings?" "Again before your guests arrive?" "No need, Thomas. I trust your recommendations completely." I straightened up, surveying the room with satisfaction. Just one small adjustment. Could we remove those two place settings? I pointed to the chairs that had been designated for Ryan and Courtney, directly across from mine at the head of the table. Thomas's professional facade didn't slip, but his eyes registered curiosity. Certainly. Has your guest count changed? No, I smiled. All 8 adults will still be attending. We'll just need to rearrange a bit when they arrive. At precisely 7 o'clock, the first of my family members arrived. Jason and Tiffany appeared at the restaurant's entrance, looking somewhat out of their element. Tiffany had made an effort, with a black cocktail dress that still had the conservative cut appropriate for the PTA meetings she regularly attended. Jason wore a suit I recognized from our father's funeral 3 years ago. "This place is something else," Jason whispered, as they were escorted to the private room. His eyes widened at the chandeliers, the impeccable service, the hushed atmosphere of money and privilege. I greeted them with genuine warmth. Despite everything, I loved my youngest brother. "Thank you for coming. The kids are all set up next door with the childcare team. Do you want to get them settled before joining us for drinks?" Tiffany hesitated. "Are you sure it's okay? I don't want them to be a burden." "It's all arranged. They'll be having their own special dinner and entertainment. Tonight is for the adults." The relief on their faces was palpable. They hadn't had a proper night out in months. Amber and Greg arrived next, followed almost immediately by Ryan and Courtney. My eldest brother had gone all out with a tuxedo, while Courtney wore a designer gown I recognized from a recent fashion magazine. They had gotten the black tie optional memo and decided to interpret it as mandatory. Typical overachievers. "Melissa." Courtney air-kissed me again, this time with something approaching genuine respect in her eyes. "This is impressive. The wait list for Canlis is months long." "Sometimes it pays to be in marketing," I replied smoothly. "Would everyone like to check on the children before we start?" The parents trooped next door, where the nannies had already engaged the kids in an elaborate craft project. The children barely looked up to acknowledge their parents, secure and content in their separate space. My niece Emma gave me a conspiratorial wink as they left. Somehow she understood this evening was important to me. When everyone returned to our private dining room, the maitre d' was waiting with flutes of champagne. "A Dom Pérignon 2008, he announced, to begin the evening. I watched my siblings exchange impressed glances. This wasn't a grocery store Prosecco. This was a statement. "Before we take our seats," I said, raising my glass slightly, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Family means everything to me, even when our paths diverge. Tonight is about reconnecting as adults, as equals." The subtle emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on them. Courtney had the grace to blush slightly. "Now, shall we?" I gestured toward the elegantly set table, with its gleaming silver and crystal. That's when Ryan noticed. "There are only 6 place settings." "Yes," I confirmed calmly. "I've arranged for Ryan and Courtney to have a special dining experience tonight." Confusion crossed their faces. Courtney's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. "I don't understand. The chef has prepared an exceptional menu that I think you'll all enjoy. But for Ryan and Courtney, there's something different planned." I maintained eye contact, my voice pleasant but firm. "You'll be dining at the chef's table in the kitchen tonight? It's quite an honor. Very few guests get the opportunity." Ryan's confusion morphed into suspicion. "Is this some kind of joke?" "Not at all. The chef's table is the most exclusive seat in the house. You'll get to watch the culinary team in action, ask questions about the preparation techniques. It's a foodie's dream experience." Every word was true, yet the implication hung unspoken in the air. Amber caught on first. A small, shocked laugh escaped her before she could stifle it. Greg elbowed her gently, but his lips twitched too. "But we won't be sitting with the family," Courtney said slowly, realizing dawning. "No," I confirmed. "You'll be at your own special table, in the kitchen. "I thought you wouldn't mind. You're both so knowledgeable about food." The callback to her Thanksgiving dismissal was unmistakable. Ryan's face flushed, but years of courtroom experience helped him maintain composure. "I see." For a moment, tension crackled through the room. I had managed to make my point without saying a word about Thanksgiving, without accusing or complaining. The ball was in their court. To my surprise, it was Courtney who recovered first. She set down her champagne flute. With deliberate care. "Well," she said, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our 15-year acquaintance, "I've always wanted to see behind the scenes at a restaurant of this caliber." Ryan followed her lead. "It is a unique opportunity," he conceded. "Though I hope we'll rejoin the family for dessert." "Of course," I smiled. "We wouldn't dream of having dessert without you." As the maitre d' escorted them to the kitchen, I caught Courtney whispering furiously to Ryan. I couldn't make out the words, but her body language spoke volumes. She knew exactly what I'd done and why. Once they were gone, the remaining four of us looked at each other in stunned silence for a moment before Amber burst into laughter. "Oh my God, Melissa, you actually did it. You put them at the kids' table." "The chef's table is hardly the kids' table," I corrected primly, taking my seat at the head of the table. "It's a coveted culinary experience. That happens to be separate from the main dining area," Greg added with a smirk. Jason shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe you actually pulled this off. Courtney's going to be plotting your murder over her amuse-bouche." We settled into our seats as the first course arrived. A delicate composition of Dungeness crab with apple, celery root, and black truffle. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily without Ryan and Courtney's dominating presence. For the first time in years, I found myself really talking with my siblings, not just exchanging pleasantries. "Remember that summer at Lake Chelan when Dad tried to teach us all to water ski?" Amber reminisced, sipping her wine. "Melissa was the only one who actually got up on the skis." I was terrified, I admitted, but more scared of giving up than of failing. "That's always been your thing," Jason said thoughtfully. "You never cared about the conventional path. I used to envy that about you." I nearly choked on my wine. "You envied me? But you've got the perfect family, the house in the suburbs, which comes with a mortgage that keeps me up at night and a job I stay in because of the health insurance," he confessed. "Don't get me wrong, I love Tiffany and the kids more than anything. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd taken a few more risks, traveled a bit before settling down." Tiffany reached for his hand. "We could still travel," she said softly. "The twins are old enough now. We don't have to wait until retirement." "You could come with me to Bali next spring," I offered. "I'm scouting locations for a client's retreat. Bring the kids. They'd love the monkeys at the sanctuary." The conversation meandered through our lives, uncovering surprising details I'd never known. Amber's seemingly perfect marriage had nearly collapsed 2 years ago when Greg lost his job and fell into depression. My outwardly conventional sister had been the family's rock, working 2 jobs until he found his footing again. "Why didn't you tell us?" I asked, genuinely hurt that I'd been kept in the dark during their struggles. Amber shrugged. "Everyone has their assigned roles in this family. You're the wild child. I'm the steady one. Admitting we were falling apart didn't fit the script." By the time the main course arrived, perfectly roasted duck with huckleberry and turnip, we had moved beyond reminiscing to really seeing each other as the adults we'd become, with all our complexities, disappointments, and triumphs. "To think," Greg mused, "all it took was excluding Ryan and Courtney to get the rest of us talking honestly." "It's not about excluding them," I clarified, though I couldn't entirely suppress a smile. "It's about changing the dynamic." When Ryan and Courtney rejoined us for dessert, a whimsical composition of chocolate, caramel, and sea salt, the energy shifted again. They seemed subdued but not angry. In fact, Courtney appeared almost thoughtful as she took her seat. "How was the chef's table?" Tiffany asked politely. Educational, Ryan replied, a certain dry humor in his tone. Chef Wilson is quite the character. He told us he'd never had a lawyer and an interior designer at his table before. Usually it's wealthy, tourists or food critics. The kitchen is like a military operation, Courtney added. Absolutely fascinating to watch, though I must say it was rather warm and the conversation revolved entirely around food preparation. I imagine it would, I said neutrally. As dessert. Concluded and coffee was served, I braced myself for potential fallout. Would there be a scene? A cold shoulder? Some passive-aggressive comment to put me back in my place? Instead, Courtney set down her espresso cup and looked directly at me. Your point is taken, Melissa. The table fell silent. I didn't mean to be cruel at Thanksgiving, she continued. Honestly, it didn't occur to me how it might feel to be the only adult at the children's table. In our house growing up, everyone pitched in with the kids. It wasn't about hierarchy. In our house growing up, I countered, the kids' table was definitely the lesser place. Ryan cleared his throat. I should have noticed. I'm sorry, Missy. Melissa. The correction of my childhood nickname didn't escape me. It was a small acknowledgement that I had grown up, that little Missy was no longer appropriate for a 45-year-old woman. Tonight wasn't about revenge, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. It was about being seen, about having my place in this family reassessed. Message received, Ryan said, raising his coffee cup in a small salute. Though I have to say, the chef's table was actually pretty interesting. Courtney's already asked if we can try it again sometime. Legitimately. Laughter rippled around the table, easing the moment. As the evening wound down, with digestives being served and the nannies texting that the children were getting sleepy, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. Not the vindictive satisfaction I might have anticipated, but something more substantial. Something had fundamentally shifted. We should do this more often, Amber suggested as we prepared to leave. Not necessarily somewhere this fancy, but adult time, where we can talk without interruption. I'd like that, I said sincerely. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. As the valet brought around our respective cars, Ryan pulled me aside. You know, he said quietly, I've always admired how you live life on your own terms. I just never knew how to say it without sounding like I was criticizing my own choices. Our choices don't have to be in competition, I replied. Different doesn't mean better or worse. He nodded, seeming to really hear me for the first time. Next Thanksgiving, he promised, there will be room for everyone at the main table. Or maybe it's time for someone else to host for a change. Maybe. It is, I agreed. After everyone had departed, I lingered for a moment in the now empty private dining room. The evening had succeeded beyond my expectations, not because I'd made my siblings uncomfortable or proven some point, but because for the first time in decades, we'd actually talked to each other instead of around each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. How did Operation Adult Table go? Do I need to help hide any bodies? I smiled as I typed my response. No bodies. Actually had a breakthrough. Tell you all about it tomorrow over brunch. As my rideshare pulled away from the restaurant, I realized something profound had changed. The evening hadn't been about the seating arrangement at all. It had been about demanding respect, and in doing so, opening a door to genuine connection that had been closed for years. The kids' table incident had been a symptom, not the disease. The real issue was the family's inability to see each other, as we truly were, rather than the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. Tonight, we'd begun to remedy that. The next morning, I awoke to a series of text messages from my family, from Amber. Last night was amazing. Let's make it a quarterly thing? From Jason. Looking at flights to Bali. Serious about joining your trip. Kids are excited about monkeys. From Tiffany. Thank you for the childcare arrangements. First time we've had an adult conversation in years. You're the best aunt. And finally, from Courtney. Thanksgiving is at your place this year. Non-negotiable. I'll bring the wine. A good one this time. I smiled at my phone screen. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make isn't telling people they're wrong. It's showing them a different way to be right. The kids' table might have been my assigned place last Thanksgiving, but I'd created an entirely new table of my own design. And surprisingly, everyone wanted a seat. The following months brought changes I never could have anticipated. What began as a simple act of asserting my place in the family had catalyzed something much more significant. The carefully maintained facade of Thompson family perfection had cracked, revealing something more authentic underneath. February brought an unexpected invitation from Jason and Tiffany. A weekend at a cabin they'd rented near Mount Rainier. No screens, no schedules, the text read. Just family time. The kids are dying to show Aunt Melissa their snow angels. I accepted immediately, touched by the deliberate inclusion. The weekend unfolded with sledding competitions, amateur attempts at snowshoeing, and evenings spent playing board games by the fireplace. The twins appointed me official hot chocolate maker, declaring my recipe even better than Mom's, much to Tiffany's mock outrage. They've never seen me as just Aunt Melissa before, I confided to Jason as we watched the kids build a snow fort. I was always Mom's wild sister or the aunt who travels too much. Kids are surprisingly good at seeing people for who they are when adults don't get in the way, Jason replied. We've been talking to them differently about you since the IBI dinner party. No more Aunt Melissa is just different comments. In March, Amber called with a proposition that left me speechless. Greg and I are thinking about taking a sabbatical next year, she announced without preamble. 6 months, maybe longer. We want to volunteer with an education initiative in South America. That's unexpected, I managed. Amber, who had never taken more than 2 weeks off work in her life. Amber, who planned her vacations down to 15-minute increments. After our conversation at the dinner party, we've been doing a lot of thinking. Life is too short to postpone the things that matter. You've been saying that for years, but I guess I needed to hear it differently. What about the kids? I asked. They'll come with us. Jeremy will be entering high school, but 1 year of experiential education won't hurt his college prospects. In fact, it might help. Give him something meaningful to write about in his applications. She hesitated. Actually, I was hoping to pick your brain. You've done the digital nomad thing. How do you make it work logistically? And just like that, I found myself in the unfamiliar position of mentor to my conventionally successful sister. We spent hours on video calls as spring unfolded, discussing international banking, distance learning options for her children, and the realities of long-term travel as a family. Even Ryan and Courtney were different after the dinner party. The thaw was gradual but unmistakable. Ryan called occasionally just to chat, something he hadn't done since college. Courtney surprised me most of all by inviting me to consult on the renovation of their lake house. You have an eye for design. That isn't bound by trends, she admitted during our first planning session. All my ideas look like they came straight from a Pottery Barn catalog. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I offered generously. She smiled, a genuine expression rarely directed at me before. It is when you want something unique, something that tells your story. She gestured to the mood board she'd created. See, I'm trying to incorporate elements from our travels, but it ends up looking like a themed restaurant. I studied the images. She'd collected a vibrant textile from their trip to Mexico, a carved wooden panel from Thailand, pottery from Greece. The problem isn't the pieces. It's that you're trying to segregate them instead of finding the conversation between them. I rearranged some of the images. What if the color story became the unifying element instead? By the end of the afternoon, we had a vision for the lake house that blended Courtney's love of order with touches of the adventurous spirit she rarely indulged. As we wrapped up, she poured us each a glass of wine. The Quilceda Creek I'd brought, To Thanksgiving, I noticed with amusement. I've never been good at seeing beyond categories, she admitted, swirling her wine. People belong in boxes in my mind. The creative one, the practical one, the reliable one. And I was the flighty one, I supplied. She had the grace to look embarrassed. It was easier than trying to understand choices so different from mine. I think I've been jealous, if I'm honest. Of me? I couldn't hide my surprise. Of your freedom, your confidence in bucking expectations. She took a sip of wine. I've spent my whole life trying to color inside the lines perfectly. The conversation meandered into territory I never expected to explore with my tightly wound sister-in-law. Her carefully curated life had its own pressures and disappointments. The perfect Thanksgiving tablescape was less about impressing others and more about controlling one small corner of a world that often felt chaotic. As spring gave way to early summer, my calendar filled with family engagements that would have been perfunctory obligations before, but now held genuine appeal. Weekend barbecues at Jason's, a vineyard tour with Ryan and Courtney, helping Amber prepare for her family's sabbatical. The most significant shift came in June, when my mother called from her retirement community in Arizona. I hear you've been shaking things up, she said without preamble. My stomach tightened. Mom had always been the family peacekeeper, smoothing ruffled feathers and maintaining harmony at all costs. Had one of my siblings complained? Just trying. To find my place, I replied carefully. Good. The approval in her voice was unmistakable. It's about time. You're not upset? Melissa Jean Thompson, she said, using my full name as she had when I was a child. I've watched you shrink yourself. At family gatherings for 20 years. You were never the problem. Our inability to make space for different choices was. I sank onto my couch, stunned. I always thought you sided with Ryan and Amber on the proper life path debate. I wanted all my children to be happy and fulfilled. The specifics never mattered to me. She paused. Your father was different. He had very fixed ideas about success. Sometimes it was easier to go along than to challenge him. But Dad's been gone 3 years, I said softly. Old habits die hard, but they do eventually die. The smile in her voice was audible. Which brings me to the reason for my call. I'm selling the Arizona place. What? You love it there? I loved the weather and the golf. But my friends are starting to move, following their grandchildren around the country, and I've been thinking about what I want from my remaining years, which is adventure. The word hung between us, a bridge rather than a barrier for once. I want to see some of those places you're always telling me about. Thailand during mango season, Christmas markets in Germany, cherry blossoms in Japan. Found myself grinning. Mom, are you asking to be my travel buddy? If the offer's open. I figure I've got another good decade of mobility before things start to get dicey. Might as well use it. 2 weeks later, I found myself helping my 72-year-old mother shop for travel gear. She approached the task with the same meticulous attention to detail she'd once devoted to organizing school fundraisers, researching the optimal luggage weight and debating the merits of various packing cubes. I'm thinking of Morocco this fall, she announced as we compared travel pillows. Or is that too ambitious for a first international trip? It depends on what kind of experience you want, I replied. Morocco is sensory overload in the best way. Colors, smells, sounds. The Medinas are labyrinths. It's beautiful chaos. She nodded decisively. Perfect. I've had enough orderly existence to last a lifetime. As summer progressed, our Morocco plans took shape. Mom surprised me with her openness to authentic experiences over tourist packages. She wanted to stay in a traditional riad, practice her rudimentary French with locals, and learn to cook tagine properly. Maybe I'll start a travel blog, she mused during one of our planning sessions. There must be other septuagenarians tired of shuffleboard and early bird specials. The weekend before Thanksgiving, the entire Thompson clan gathered at my condo for brunch, a tradition that had emerged organically over the past year. I'd discovered a talent for Belgian waffles with seasonal compotes, which had become the centerpiece of these gatherings. Amber and Greg joined via video call from Peru, where they were 4 months into their sabbatical. Their children waved from the background, sun-browned and visibly more confident than the suburban kids they'd been a year ago. "We've extended our stay through next summer," Amber announced. "The school has asked Greg to develop a technology curriculum, and I'm working with a women's cooperative on their business plan." "What about the kids' education?" Ryan asked, the old concern for propriety surfacing briefly. Jeremy, Amber's oldest, leaned into the frame. "I'm taking AP classes online and volunteering at a sea turtle conservation project. Pretty sure that looks better on college applications than another year of debate club." His newfound confidence was evident even through the spotty connection. Ryan conceded the point with a laugh. "Can't argue with that logic. Though I'm starting to think college applications might look different by the time our kids get there anyway." This from my brother, who had once insisted Ivy League credentials were the only path to success. The man continued to surprise me. "Speaking of Thanksgiving," I said, refilling coffee cups around the table, "I hope everyone's still planning to come to my place this year." "Wouldn't miss it," Courtney assured me. "I've got the wine chilling already." Jason lifted his mug and toast. "To new traditions." "And speaking of new," my mother interjected, "I've listed the Arizona house. It goes on the market next week." This announcement was met with a moment of shocked silence from those who hadn't been privy to her plans. "But where will you live?" Ryan finally asked. Mom shrugged with a newfound nonchalance. "Here and there. Melissa and I are starting with Morocco next month. Then we'll see. I'm thinking of trying out different cities for a few months at a time." "You're going nomadic at 72? Courtney couldn't hide her astonishment. "Why not? My health is good. My mind is sharp. And frankly, the retirement community was starting to feel like a waiting room." Mom's expression softened. "Life is too short to spend it waiting." The conversation flowed into logistics. What she'd do with her furniture, how she'd manage healthcare while traveling, whether she should start with short-term rentals or buy a small condo as a home base. My traditionally minded siblings adjusted to this new reality with surprising grace. Later, as we cleared dishes together, Ryan nudged my shoulder gently. "You've created a monster, you know. Mom's talking about Instagram and travel apps now." "I merely presented options," I replied. "She made her own choices." "Well, those choices are having a ripple effect. Courtney's making noises about taking a gap year with the kids before college. Says it would be educationally enriching." I nearly dropped the plate I was rinsing. "Courtney? Of the color-coded family calendar and 5-year plan?" "The very same." He shook his head in bemused wonder. "It's like dominoes falling. One person steps out of their assigned role, and suddenly everyone's reevaluating." "Is that a bad thing?" I asked carefully. "Different," he replied. "Not bad, just requiring adjustment." He dried a serving platter with methodical attention. "You know what the funny thing is? I always thought family harmony meant everyone playing their assigned parts perfectly. Turns out it's more about creating space for everyone to change their parts as needed." On Thanksgiving Day, almost exactly a year after I'd been relegated to the kids' table, I surveyed my dining room with satisfaction. I'd rearranged my furniture to accommodate a table large enough for everyone, adults and children alike. No separate kids' table. No hierarchy. The decor was a blend of traditional and unexpected elements. Classic autumn flowers mingled with feathers and driftwood I'd collected from walks along the Sound. The place settings featured my grandmother's, silver alongside modern stoneware plates in jewel tones. Name cards were handwritten by Emma, who had discovered calligraphy through an online class. When everyone arrived, there was a moment of appreciative silence as they took in the scene. "It's perfect," Courtney said, and I knew she meant it. The perfect blend of tradition and rebellion. I prefer to think of it as evolution, I replied with a smile. We gathered around the table, siblings, in-laws, nieces, nephews, and my mother, who was leaving for Morocco with me in just 3 days. The children were interspersed among the adults rather than segregated, creating natural conversations across generations. As we settled in, Mom raised her glass. To Melissa, who taught us all that sometimes the best traditions are the ones you create yourself. And to family, I added, who can grow even when they've grown up. The meal unfolded with the comfortable chaos of people who had learned to truly see and accept each other. My nephew Cooper debated environmental policy with Ryan. Tiffany and I exchanged travel tips. The twins entertained us with a song they'd learned specifically for the occasion. Later, as dessert was being served, Emma slipped into the chair beside me. "Aunt Melissa," she whispered. "Remember last year when you had to sit with us kids?" I nodded, curious where this was going. "I'm kinda glad that happened," she continued earnestly, "because then you made this dinner happen, and now everything's different. Better be different." From the mouth of babes, I thought, squeezing her hand. Sometimes the wrong seat leads you to exactly where you need to be. As I looked around at my family, imperfect, evolving, increasingly authentic, I realized the kids' table incident had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to advocate for my place in the family, but in doing so, had created space for everyone to redefine themselves. We were no longer confined to our assigned seats at the Thompson family table. We were free to move about, to grow, to change. And somehow that had made room for all of us to finally come home to ourselves. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Mom and I boarded our flight to Casablanca. The trip we'd spent months planning was finally happening. As the plane lifted off from Seattle, I glanced at her profile illuminated by the soft glow of the reading light. She looked younger somehow, the anticipation of adventure smoothing the lines around her eyes. "Second thoughts?" I asked as we reached cruising altitude. She turned to me with a smile that erased any doubt. "None. Though I keep thinking about what your father would say if he could see me now. Heading to Morocco with a carry-on suitcase and no return ticket?" "Exactly." She chuckled softly. He was so convinced that security meant staying in one place, building a fortress of familiarity. I considered this. You never seemed to mind that approach when he was alive. Marriage is a compromise, Melissa. I got the 4 kids I wanted. He got the traditional family structure he valued. She adjusted her neck pillow thoughtfully. But I always envied those National Geographic magazines he kept in his study. All those places I thought I'd never see. And now I'm writing my own 3rd act. She squeezed my hand. Thanks to you. The Morocco experience exceeded even our careful planning. The riad we'd selected in Marrakech's ancient Medina became our haven. A peaceful courtyard with a bubbling fountain, surrounded by intricately tiled rooms with arched doorways. Each morning, we'd enjoy breakfast on the rooftop terrace, watching the city come alive as the call to prayer echoed from nearby minarets. Mom approached everything with an openness that astonished me. She haggled with carpet merchants in the souk, sampling mint tea with gusto as she negotiated. She signed up for a cooking class and mastered the art of preserved lemons. She struck up conversations with fellow travelers half her age, exchanging tips and recommendations. "I should have done this decades ago," she declared one evening as we dined at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Jama' El Fna Square, the night market pulsing with energy below us. But then again, maybe I needed those decades of certainty to appreciate the beauty of uncertainty now. 2 weeks into our Moroccan adventure, she made an announcement over breakfast. "I've been thinking about what comes next." I lowered my coffee cup. "I thought we were considering Spain?" "Eventually, yes. But first, I want to go home and sell most of my things." Her expression was resolute. "I've been lugging around possessions for 50 years. It's time to travel light." The next month became a whirlwind of logistics. We cut our Morocco trip slightly short and flew back to Arizona, where Mom approached the dismantling of her domestic life with the same enthusiasm she'd brought to exploring Marrakech's labyrinthine streets. Keep, donate, sell, trash became her mantra as she sorted through decades of accumulated belongings. Family heirlooms were carefully allocated among my siblings and me. Furniture was sold or donated. Closets of clothing were ruthlessly edited, down to a carefully curated travel wardrobe. "Do you really need 17 Christmas sweaters?" I teased as she sorted through her holiday wear. "Not a single one," she replied, adding the entire stack to the donation pile. "If I'm somewhere cold, for Christmas I'll buy one locally, a souvenir with purpose." Ryan flew down to help for a weekend, visibly struggling with this dramatic dismantling of our childhood home away from home. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" he asked as they sorted through photo albums together. "What if you want to settle down? Again? Then I'll settle somewhere new," she replied simply. "We hold on to things thinking they're anchors, but sometimes they're actually weights." By February, her 2-bedroom condo had been sold, her remaining possessions packed into a storage unit the size of a walk-in closet, and her permanent address changed to my Seattle condo, a temporary measure until she decided on a home base, if she ever wanted one again. "Where to next?" I asked as we celebrated the closing of her condo sale with champagne. She pulled out her tablet, where she'd created a color-coded map of potential destinations. Another inheritance from her former life as an organized suburban mother, now repurposed. For adventure. "I'm thinking of Portugal for spring," she said. "The Algarve is supposed to be beautiful, and the cost of living is reasonable. Maybe a month there, then work my way up through Spain for the summer?" "Solo?" I asked, surprised. Our Morocco trip had been a tandem adventure. "You have your life, honey, your job, your friends. I can't expect you to be my travel companion forever," she smiled. "Though you're welcome to join me for segments when you can." And just like that, my 72-year-old mother had outpaced me in embracing the unknown. I found myself both immensely proud and slightly disoriented by this role reversal. Back in Seattle, spring brought new developments in the evolving Thompson family saga. Jason's twins were cast in the same children's theater production I volunteered with occasionally, leading to regular coffee dates after Saturday morning rehearsals. "The kids can't stop talking about Morocco," Tiffany mentioned during one such meet-up. "All those videos you and your mom shared have them convinced they need to see the world immediately." "Sorry about that," I laughed. "Don't be. It's expanding their horizons." She stirred her latte thoughtfully. "Actually, we've been thinking about doing something similar ourselves. Maybe not as ambitious as selling everything, but a sabbatical. 3 months next year, if we can swing it financially." "Where would you go?" "The twins want Japan, all that anime influence. But we're thinking somewhere in Central America might be more practical for a first international trip with kids." I found myself in the surprising position of family travel consultant, helping Jason and Tiffany research language schools in Costa Rica, where the twins could take Spanish classes while they explored ecotourism options. What had begun as a simple act of asserting my rightful place at the dinner table had catalyzed a transformation none of us could have predicted. The rigid family roles we'd occupied for decades had dissolved, allowing each of us to incorporate aspects of others' lifestyles that resonated personally. Ryan and Courtney were downsizing and planning extended travel. Amber and Greg had embraced international living and service. Jason and Tiffany were preparing their children for global citizenship. Mom had reinvented herself as an expatriate consultant, and I, the perpetual family rebel, had found joy in sharing my knowledge through teaching, creating a different kind of stability that didn't require sacrificing my independence or adventurous spirit. We'd all found our right seats at the table of life, not the ones assigned to us by family expectation or social convention, but the ones we'd chosen for ourselves. And remarkably, those self-selected seats allowed us to see each other more clearly than the prescribed family arrangement ever had. When my department chair asked what I'd like to call my expanded course for the following year, the answer came immediately. Finding your seat at the global table. It seemed fitting, an acknowledgement that sometimes being relegated to the wrong place is the first step toward discovering where you truly belong. July in Lisbon arrived with radiant sunshine and a gentle Atlantic breeze. As I stepped onto the terrace of the villa we'd rented for our first official Thompson family reunion, the city sprawled before me. A picturesque cascade of terracotta roofs, winding cobblestone streets, and the sparkling Tagus River beyond. The past 6 months had unfolded with their own momentum. My second semester of teaching had concluded with an unexpected honor, the business school's adjunct faculty teaching award, and an offer to develop a graduate-level course for the following year. My marketing agency work continued to thrive, with new international clients appreciating my academic insights into cross-cultural communication. The family's global dispersion had only intensified. Jason and Tiffany were 3 months into their Costa Rican sabbatical, with the twins now conversationally fluent in Spanish and obsessed with sloth conservation. Amber and Greg had relocated from Peru to Colombia, where they were consulting with indigenous artisans on sustainable business practices. Ryan and Courtney had sold their suburban mansion, moved into the renovated lake house, and were meticulously planning their family gap year, scheduled to begin that September. And Mom had become something of a minor celebrity in the expatriate community. Her blog, Border Crossing, A Grandmother's Guide to Global Living, had attracted a modest but dedicated following of seniors contemplating similar lifestyle changes. She'd even been approached by a publisher interested in developing her posts into a guidebook. Now, after months of planning, we were all converging on Lisbon for 2 weeks together. The first time the entire Thompson clan would be in one place, since Thanksgiving at my condo 18 months earlier. Mom arrived first, taking the train up from her home base in the Algarve. She looked younger than she had in years, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her skin sun-kissed, her movements energetic as she helped prepare the villa for everyone's arrival. "The secret to aging well isn't avoiding wrinkles," she declared, as we arranged fresh flowers from the local market. "It's accumulating stories faster than you accumulate years." Jason's family landed next, the twins bursting through the door with excited chatter about the airplane meals and the Portuguese. Phrases they'd practiced. Their faces were tanned from the Central American sun, their personalities noticeably more confident than before. "Lucas got invited to play soccer with local kids our second week in Costa Rica," Tiffany explained as we prepared lunch. "He didn't speak more than 10 words of Spanish, but it didn't matter. Since then, both twins have been fearless about jumping into new situations." "That's the real education," Mom nodded approvingly. "Learning that differences aren't barriers, they're doorways." Ryan's family arrived in the late afternoon, their teenagers remarkably unburdened by the typical adolescent sullenness I'd observed at previous family gatherings. Preparing for their upcoming gap year had given them a sense of purpose and anticipation. "We've each chosen 2 countries where we get to plan the itinerary," Ryan's 14-year-old daughter Madison explained over dinner. "I picked Japan and Greece. Dad has to stick to the budget I set." Ryan feigned despair. "She's ruthless with spreadsheets." Gets it from her mother. Courtney, who'd once approached family vacations with military precision and 5-star accommodations, laughed. "Actually, Madison's budget is tighter than mine would be. She's prioritizing experiences over luxury hotels." "The world's greatest classroom doesn't need fancy furniture," Madison replied with the self-assurance of someone twice her age. Amber and Greg's arrival the following morning completed our gathering. Their 3 children had the weathered look of young adventurers, sun-streaked hair, confident postures, eyes that observed everything with curious attention. "Jeremy got accepted to Princeton," Amber announced during breakfast on the terrace. "But he's deferring for a year to work with an environmental research team in the Amazon." Mom nearly had a heart attack. Jeremy added with a grin, until the Princeton admissions officer said gap years make their students more focused when they do start college. I'm adapting, Amber admitted. Slowly, the reunion days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent exploring Lisbon's historic neighborhoods together, navigating the steep hills of Alfama, sampling pastel de nata in Belém, riding the iconic yellow trams. Afternoons often found us split into interest-based groups rather than the traditional adult-child division that had once defined our family gatherings. Mom led architectural tours for history enthusiasts. Ryan and I took the more adventurous, kids surfing at nearby beaches. Jason organized a cooking class where participants ranged from 8 to 72 years old. Amber and Courtney, once the most different of the in-laws, bonded over a shared interest in Portuguese textile traditions. Evenings brought us together for long dinners on the villa's terrace, where conversation flowed as freely as the local wine. The rigid topics that had once dominated family discussions, school district rankings, retirement account strategies, proper career trajectories, had given way to passionate exchanges about sustainability, cultural differences, language acquisition, and life philosophies. Remember when holiday dinner conversations were just updates on promotions and home renovations? Jason mused one evening as we lingered over dessert. Now I can barely keep up with all the perspectives flying around this table. That's because we're actually living now, not just existing, Mom replied. Real experiences give you something worth talking about. On our fifth night, as shooting stars streaked across the Lisbon sky, Courtney raised her glass. I'd like to propose a toast to Melissa. All eyes turned to me, and I felt a momentary flush of self-consciousness. 2 years ago, Courtney continued, you were shown to the kids' table, and instead of just accepting it, you created an entirely new table. You couldn't have known it then, but that act of self-respect was the pebble that started an avalanche. Here, Ryan seconded, raising his glass. To Melissa, who taught us all that assigned seats are less interesting than chosen ones. The warmth of their acknowledgement washed over me, but something felt incomplete in their framing. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I think the credit goes to all of us. I just responded to a moment of disrespect. Each of you chose to reflect on your own lives afterward. That took courage. Greg, usually the quietest of the in-laws, spoke up. It's like dominoes, though. Your action created space for Amber to consider our sabbatical, which inspired Jason and Tiffany, which influenced Ryan and Courtney, which emboldened your mother. And now the second generation is running with it, Amber added, gesturing to the teenagers who were, for once, fully engaged in the adult conversation rather than lost in their devices. Madison's budget-conscious travel planning, Jeremy's research deferral, even the twins' sloth conservation passion. These are all branches of the same tree. The conversation shifted to planning our second annual reunion. The unanimous vote was for Japan the following summer, timed to coincide with the Tanabata Festival in Kyoto, where Emma had become fascinated with the tradition of writing wishes on paper streamers. As the others debated the logistics of accommodating 14 people in Japanese lodgings, I stepped away from the table for a moment, moving to the terrace railing to gaze out at the city lights below. The warm night air carried the faint sounds of fado music from a distant restaurant. The contentment I felt wasn't just about family harmony or being acknowledged for my role in our collective transformation. It was deeper, a sense of alignment with myself and my place in the world that had eluded me even when I was ostensibly living on my own terms. Mom joined me at the railing, her presence a comfortable silence before she spoke. You've got that look again. What look? The one where you're thinking too deeply for a vacation evening. She bumped my shoulder gently with hers. What's on your mind? I considered deflecting, but opted for honesty. I was just thinking about identity. For so long, I defined myself in opposition to the family expectations, the rebel, the different one. And now that everyone's rebelling in their own way, you're having an existential crisis? Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were kind. Not a crisis exactly. More like a recalibration. When being different is no longer your defining characteristic. Who are you? She contemplated this, gazing out at the city. Maybe the better question is, who do you want to be? That's just it. I'm discovering that my identity was always more than just the family rebel. It was wrapped up in my curiosity, my adaptability, my desire to connect authentically with different kinds of people. Those things haven't changed, she pointed out. No, but my understanding of them has. Teaching has shown me that what I thought was restlessness might actually be a gift for translation, helping others navigate unfamiliar territory, whether that's a foreign market or a new idea. Mom smiled. You get that from your father, you know. This surprised me. Dad? The man who lived in the same house for 40 years and worked for the same company his entire career? Before we had you kids, your father was stationed in Germany, with the army. He was the unofficial welcome committee for new American families, helping them understand the local customs, navigate the bureaucracy, find their footing. He might have settled into conventional stability later, but that translator spirit was always part of him. I absorbed this unexpected connection to my late father, a new lens through which to view both his life and my own. The trouble with assigned seats, Mom continued, isn't just that they might be at the wrong table. It's that they limit how you see yourself. What's wonderful about this new chapter for our family is that we're all discovering facets of ourselves that were always there, just waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lucas and Lily, who were organizing an impromptu talent show and needed judges. As we rejoined the family gathering, I carried Mom's insight with me, the recognition that true identity isn't fixed or defined by contrast to others, but continually revealed through the choices we make and the contexts we create. The reunion's second week brought excursions beyond Lisbon, a day trip to the fairy tale palaces of Sintra, wine tasting in the Douro Valley, a weekend at a seaside village where we learned to harvest sea salt using traditional methods. Each experience seemed to strengthen the new family dynamic, where connections formed based on shared interests rather than prescribed roles. On our final evening together, we gathered for a sunset dinner cruise on the Tagus River. As Lisbon's historic buildings glowed golden in the fading light, conversation turned to the future. We should formalize this reunion tradition, Ryan suggested. Make it official with a rotating planning committee for each year. And a theme, Madison added, eagerly, like cultural immersion or culinary exploration or environmental action. We could create a family foundation, Courtney proposed. Pool some resources to support causes in the places we visit each year. Or establish a scholarship, Jeremy contributed. For kids who want international experiences but can't afford them? I watched in quiet amazement as ideas flourished, each more thoughtful than the last. The competitive edge that had once characterized family interactions, subtle one-upmanship about jobs, homes, children's achievements, had transformed into collaborative creativity. Later that night, after returning to the villa, I found Emma sitting alone on the terrace steps, gazing at the night sky. Star watching? I asked, settling beside her. She nodded. I'm trying to memorize the way the stars look from Portugal, so I can compare them to the view from home. And then from Japan next year. That's a lovely project. She turned to me, her expression serious beyond her 12 years. Can I tell you something, Aunt Melissa? Of course. I was there, you know. When Mom and Dad were talking about putting you at the kids' table that Thanksgiving, I heard the whole conversation. This was unexpected. You did? She nodded. Mom said it made sense because you were single and good with kids. Dad said you probably wouldn't mind because you were easygoing. But I remember thinking it wasn't fair, because you were a grown-up just like them. What did you do? I asked gently. Nothing. Her voice held a touch of regret. I didn't say anything because I was 10 and no one listens to 10-year-olds about where people should sit. But then you showed up at the dinner and put Uncle Ryan and Aunt Courtney at the special table in the kitchen. She grinned at the memory. And? And it made me realize that even grown-ups have to stand up for themselves sometimes. That just because someone puts you somewhere doesn't mean you have to stay there. She hugged her knees to her chest. It's the reason I tried out for the lead in the school play this year, even though my friends said I should just be in the chorus like always. Did you get the part? Her smile widened. I'm playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Mom said you could help me practice my songs when we get back. I'd be honored. She leaned against my shoulder. I'm glad you didn't stay. At the kids' table, Aunt Melissa. Me too, sweetheart. As the family dispersed the following day, Jason's crew heading back to Costa Rica, Amber's to Colombia, Ryan's to their lake house to finalize gap year preparations, and Mom to her Algarve apartment, I found myself reflecting on Emma's words. During my solitary flight back to Seattle, the incident at the kids' table had never really been about where I was seated for a single meal. It had been about refusing to accept an assigned place that didn't honor my authentic self. What I couldn't have anticipated was how that single act of self-respect would create a ripple effect, giving others permission to question their own assigned seats, not just at the dinner table but in life. Back home, as summer transitioned to fall, I confronted a decision I'd been contemplating since Lisbon. The university had offered me a position as executive in residence, a part-time role that would allow me to develop and teach specialized courses while maintaining my consulting practice. It represented a level of institutional commitment I'd previously avoided, yet the structured flexibility appealed to me in ways I hadn't expected. After careful consideration, I accepted. With one condition: the academic calendar would need to accommodate my commitment to the annual Thompson family reunion. Of course, the dean agreed readily. Your real-world global experience is exactly what makes you valuable to our students. We wouldn't want to limit that. As I settled into my expanded teaching role, I discovered a satisfying rhythm to my newly balanced life. Campus energy invigorated my consulting work, while client projects provided fresh case studies for my students. Periodic travel, both for work and pleasure, prevented any sense of stagnation. That December, as I prepared for a pre-holiday visit from Mom, now between her stint in Portugal and a planned 3 months in Vietnam, I received a package from Courtney. Inside was an elegant photo album titled New Seats at the Table. The album contained professional photographs from our Lisbon reunion, but with a creative twist. Each family member was captured in a variety of contexts. Mom teaching Portuguese, children, Ryan surfing with his teenage son, Amber collaborating with Colombian artisans, the twins examining a sloth in a wildlife sanctuary, and me, lecturing to graduate students, hiking a coastal trail, and deep in conversation with my nieces and nephews on the Lisbon terrace. The final page held a note in Courtney's precise handwriting. Melissa. This album is partly an apology and partly a thank you. An apology for ever trying to confine you, or any of us, to a single limited role in our family. And a thank you for showing us that the table is large enough for all of us to choose our own seats, and to change them as often as we need to. See you in Kyoto. With gratitude, Courtney. I ran my fingers over the words, recognizing the journey they represented. Not just for me, but for our entire family. The assigned seats of our past had given way to chosen seats that could shift and evolve as we discovered new aspects of ourselves. The kids' table incident, once a source of frustration, had become the catalyst for our collective liberation. In refusing to accept an assigned place that diminished me, I had somehow created space for everyone to find their authentic place, not just at the family table, but in the world. And that realization was the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, The strongest statement isn't demanding a better seat at someone else's table, but having the courage to create an entirely new table of your own design, and saving seats for those brave enough to join you there. 5 years after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I found myself back in Ryan and Courtney's dining room. The house was the same, but nearly everything else had changed. The formal dining table that had once been the center of family power dynamics was gone, replaced by a large round table crafted from reclaimed wood. No head seat, no foot, just equal places in a circle with chairs of various styles gathered from their global travels. "We got this one in Kyoto," Courtney explained, running her hand along the back of a minimalist bamboo chair, "and that cushioned one is from a market in Marrakesh." The occasion was a milestone, Mom's 77th birthday. After 5 years of nomadic living, she'd decided to establish a home base again, purchasing a small cottage on Bainbridge Island, a short ferry ride from Seattle. Not that she planned to stay put entirely. Her upcoming itinerary included a culinary tour of Thailand and a writing retreat in New Zealand. But she wanted a place to return to between adventures. The Thompson diaspora needed a gathering point, she'd explained when announcing her decision. Somewhere for us all to land when our paths cross. The family had indeed scattered. Amber and Greg had returned from South America, but not to their former suburban existence. They'd settled in a small coastal town in Washington where Greg taught technology at a progressive high school, and Amber ran a fair trade import business featuring the artisanal goods of the women she'd worked with abroad. Jason and Tiffany had extended their Central American sabbatical twice before finally returning to Seattle, where they'd downsized to a modest home in a diverse neighborhood they'd fallen in love with during their travels. The twins, now 10, were enrolled in a Spanish immersion school and spent weekends volunteering at a wildlife rehabilitation center. Ryan and Courtney had completed their family gap year, an experience that had profoundly affected their oldest, daughter Madison. Now preparing for college, she'd been accepted to several prestigious universities but had chosen to attend a school with a strong international relations program and robust study abroad opportunities. And me? My life had found its own equilibrium. The executive in residence position at the university had expanded to include directing a new global marketing institute, which brought international executives to campus for specialized training programs. My consulting work continued, though I'd become more selective about clients, prioritizing those whose values aligned with my own. And I'd finally purchased the cabin on Lopez Island I'd been eyeing for years, a peaceful retreat for writing, thinking, and hosting small gatherings of friends and family. As we settled around the table for Mom's birthday dinner, the conversation flowed with the easy rhythm of people comfortable in their authenticity. The family hierarchy that had once dictated our interactions had dissolved, replaced by a genuine interest in each other's evolving lives. "So who's hosting Thanksgiving? This year?" Mom asked as we passed dishes family-style around the table. A moment of amused silence fell over the group. Thanksgiving had become something of a floating holiday for the Thompsons, sometimes celebrated traditionally, sometimes reimagined entirely. "I was thinking," Ryan began, "that we might do something different this year." "Different how?" Jason asked. "What if we volunteered at a community dinner instead, all of us together? Giving back instead of just eating ourselves into a food coma." "I love that idea," Amber enthused. "The kids are old enough to help serve, and it would be a meaningful way to spend the day." "Speaking of community," Courtney added, "we should talk about the foundation." The Thompson Family Foundation had emerged from our conversation on that Lisbon dinner cruise 3 years earlier. Starting small, we'd each contributed what we could to establish a fund supporting educational travel, experiences for young people who couldn't otherwise afford them. Last year, we sponsored our first group of scholarship recipients, 5 high school students who joined us for part of our reunion in New Zealand. "I've been thinking about expanding the mission," Madison suggested. She'd taken on the role of foundation coordinator during her gap year before college. What if we added a component for seniors, helping people like Grandma who want to travel in their retirement but don't know where to start? Intergenerational connection. Mom nodded, approvingly. I like it. As the conversation evolved into foundation logistics, I caught Emma's eye across the table. Now a poised 17-year-old, she'd recently been accepted to a pre-college summer program in musical theater. Still glad I didn't stay at the kids' table? I asked her quietly. Her smile was thoughtful. Sometimes I wonder how different things would be if Aunt Courtney had just made room for you that day. I considered this alternate timeline. I might have swallowed my pride and sat with the adults. Everyone would have followed the established script, and maybe nothing would have changed. That would have been a tragedy, she declared with teenage certainty. This family was so boring before the Great Table Rebellion. I laughed, but her observation held truth. The family dynamic had been stagnant, locked in patterns established decades earlier. My small act of resistance had cracked that rigid structure, allowing something more authentic to emerge. After dinner, as everyone migrated to the back deck to watch the sunset over the lake, Ryan pulled me aside. I found something when we were cleaning out the storage room last month, he said, handing me a small box. I thought you might want to have it. Inside was a place card holder, silver, tarnished with age. I recognized it immediately as one of the set Courtney had used for that Thanksgiving table 5 years ago. Why would I want this? I asked, puzzled. Turn it over. On the bottom was an engraving I'd never noticed. Emsa Thompson. It was Mom's originally, Ryan explained. From her formal entertaining days. Courtney borrowed the set for Thanksgiving that year. Each one has a different family member's initial. I ran my finger over the engraving. So I actually did have a place at the table all along? Technically, yes, though your card somehow never made it there. He shrugged. Courtney doesn't remember. Now, if it was an oversight or intentional, either way, it seems like a fitting souvenir of the moment that changed everything. Later that evening, as friends joined the family celebration and the house filled with laughter and music, I found a quiet moment with Mom on the dock, our feet dangling above the dark water. Happy birthday, I said, handing her a small package. This isn't your main gift. That's the cooking class in Bangkok next month. But this is something special. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a custom-made compass with an inscription on the back. Not all who wander are lost, but all who stay put might be. It's perfect, she laughed, holding it up to catch the light from the house. Though I have to say, putting down roots on Bainbridge doesn't feel like staying put. It feels like creating a new kind of motion, a center point for all our orbits. I like that image, I nodded. We're all still moving, just in relation to each other now instead of away from each other. She tucked the compass into her pocket. You know what I'm most proud of in all this family transformation? That we didn't lose anyone along the way. Everyone evolved, everyone found their authentic path, but no one had to be excluded for that to happen. This observation struck me as profoundly important. So often, family dynamics fractured when individuals stepped out of assigned roles. Yet, somehow our family had managed to expand rather than splinter. It makes me think about that dinner party at Canlis, I admitted. When I put Ryan and Courtney at the chef's table, separated from everyone else. Your point needed making, Mom assured me. And the separation was temporary. Still, I wonder if there could have been a different way to make the point. One that didn't involve excluding anyone, even briefly. She considered this. Perhaps. But sometimes a pattern needs to be broken dramatically before it can be reshaped. The brief discomfort of that evening created the opening for years of authentic connection afterward. From the deck came the sound of glasses clinking, a toast being proposed. We made our way back to the gathering, where Courtney stood addressing the assembled friends and family. To Martha Thompson, she raised her glass to Mom, who showed us all that the most vibrant third acts often involve rewriting the script entirely. and to the butterfly effect of one Thanksgiving dinner that changed the trajectory of an entire family. As glasses were raised and birthday wishes offered, I contemplated the journey from that kid's table to this moment. The silver place card holder in my pocket seemed less like a reminder of exclusion now, and more like a relic of an outdated way of being, preserved not in bitterness, but as a marker of how far we'd all traveled. The true victory hadn't been securing a better seat at someone else's table. It had been dismantling the very notion that tables needed assigned seating at all. In its place, we'd created a family culture where places could shift, where roles could evolve, and where each person's journey was valued for its unique contribution to our collective story. As the evening wound down and family members began gathering their belongings, Emma approached with her new boyfriend in tow, a thoughtful young man she'd met in her theater program. Tyler's family does this thing at tea gatherings, she explained. Before everyone leaves, they each share something they're taking with them. Not a physical object, but an idea or feeling to carry forward. The ritual caught on immediately, with everyone gathering in a circle to participate. I'm taking inspiration. For my college application essay, Madison offered. Something about how family rebellion can be inherited. I'm taking the foundation expansion idea, Jason added. The intergenerational component feels important. When it came to my turn, I found the perfect truth waiting. I'm taking the knowledge that sometimes not having a seat at one table leads to building a better table of your own. As goodnights were exchanged and cars filled with departing guests, I lingered on the front porch with Ryan. The tension that had once characterized our sibling relationship had long since transformed into genuine mutual respect. It's strange to think about, he mused, how differently things might have gone if Courtney had just made space for you at the table that day. Emma said something similar earlier. Great minds, he smiled. But seriously, that one moment of exclusion catalyzed so much positive change. It's almost enough to make me believe in divine intervention, I laughed. Or just the power of refusing to accept an assigned place that doesn't honor your true self. As I drove home that night, the compass I'd given Mom seemed to take on metaphorical significance. We'd all been navigating by fixed points for so many years: career success, social standing, material achievement, conventional family structures. The revolution that began at the kids' table had reset our navigational tools, allowing each of us to find our true north. The silver place card holder rested on my mantle now, not as a bitter reminder, but as a small monument to a pivotal moment. The moment when being seated at the wrong table led to creating an entirely new kind of gathering, one where places could shift, perspectives could evolve, and everyone could find the right seat for exactly who they were becoming. Sometimes the greatest gift is being put in the wrong place and finding the courage to create a better one. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.